Today is July 20th, 2026. This is episode 4 of my continuing series with Amy, better known as Case by Case from YouTube, regarding the 2017 Delphi double homicide. Some time has passed since episode 3, and I have a few updates I thought I would share with everyone. I have finished reading 2 books regarding the Delphi case. The first is The Quest to Find the Man on the Bridge by the True Crime Garage host Nick Edwards, and the second is The Shadow of the Bridge by Kane and Greenlee, that host the Murder Sheet podcast. And you know what? I do intend to read the Susan Hendricks book as well, if I can get my hands on an electronic copy. I believe those are the only big three on the market that I was able to find from a search. And I know Chris Todd has one that I also have a copy of. Rick Snay told me a while ago that he was writing a book. It is yet to be published. I don't know what the update is on that. I would like to read that as well. I did my best to try to convince Rick to produce a mini movie, maybe even an audiobook instead. I think book publishing is basically dead today. If you have something important that you would like to say and you don't want the masses to see it, I would say publish it in a book. Okay, enough of my snide comments about the book industry. Let's move on. Now, I'm sure listeners are wondering why in the world I wanted to read the Murder Sheet book. You've heard my previous questions. You've heard my previous commentary. Doesn't seem like a fit, does it? Well, the reason is very simple. They seem to be the biggest proponents of the official story, and I want to be intimately familiar with all of their contentions. You have to be in order to be an effective commentator. You can't just dismiss whatever side you don't agree with initially, or at least you shouldn't. So I read their book and I enjoyed the read, although it was roughly 400 pages. It was a long read. They are good writers. I'll give them that. They kept the pace moving with short, impactful chapters instead of boring the reader to death. It was more exhaustive and thorough than the Nick Edwards True Crime Garage book, which had other cases presented and was shorter and, I guess, less comprehensive. I found myself wanting to continue turning the pages over a period of several days with the Murder Sheet book, Shadow of the Bridge. The Edwards book, the True Crime Garage book, was less compelling. And I believe that they, that being Kane and Greenlee, I think they did themselves a disservice by dismissing the defense's information and ignoring possible exculpatory evidence. And they're going to have to live with that criticism for years to come, and we should hold them to it. This true crime power couple did score some points in my mind, undoubtedly. They did clarify a few issues or topics that previously were not clear to me. However, I did not come away convinced that I could rest my curiosities in this case and take comfort in breathing a sigh of relief that Richard Allen is behind bars. Again, the linchpin of this case against Richard Allen is the unfired .40 caliber Smith & Wesson cartridge found at the crime scene between the girls' bodies. An unfired pistol round that could have been anybody's, since the prosecution couldn't prove it belonged to Allen via fingerprint evidence. Remember, this piece of evidence is the anchoring fact of the probable cause affidavit for Richard Allen's arrest. The same PCA that McClelland and the Patty family convinced us had to remain sealed for the integrity of the case. The state's claim that tool marks from cycling and ejections on the cartridge match Richard Allen's Sig Sauer P226 pistol is dubious. Many have criticized this practice as junk science. It's my understanding that several criminal defendants across the country, once convicted with this sort of firearm evidence used against them, have had their convictions overturned. One example is that of Patrick Pursley of Illinois, who spent 23 years in prison. before finally being exonerated. Shadow of the Bridge, which again is the Murder Sheet book, seems to source the majority of its content from individuals in unified command. You get the sense that exclusive access to Doug Carter, Jerry Holman, Tony Liggett, Tobe Lesenby, Nick McClelland, and others were granted or obtained over some years. Several people had told me that the Murder Sheet podcast was an outlet for the police. They'd leak info or have the official scoop hours before it was disclosed by authorities. In fairness, I did enjoy several of the behind-the-scenes accounts of tension, doubt, conflict between personalities involved in the case reported in the book. From Tobe Lesenby insisting upon being at the podium during a press conference with Doug Carter, finally giving in and replying, "Fine, stand there and look like a fucking idiot." Or another instance of Jerry Holman, ever the bonehead, pressing Doug Carter after another press conference, asking him point blank, "What the fuck is the shack?" Or another incident where Holman warns potential leakers he'll want to kick them in the fucking nuts if he catches them. You might think the prosecution was cool as a cucumber, confident they had a slam dunk case all along. That is not the situation relayed in the book. Sleepless nights, day after day of doubt and tension, even with McClelland approaching Holman some days and frankly asking him, "What are we missing?" Worried that the defense would unsheath some mighty weapon of truth that they weren't prepared for. Fortunately for Holman and McClelland, Baldwin and Rosie seemed to fumble on the goal line more often than not. I get the sense from reading the book that they really could not stand the quote-unquote cranks and YouTubers, as they called them. They spanked several of these figures and painted them as unhinged loons or distasteful jerks at several points in the book. Bob and Allie Mata, Erica Morse, and Julie Melvin are three examples. Reading between the lines, the Greenlee couple are official journalists, and I get the sense they really resented anybody who questioned the official narrative. I imagine that official journalists really do resent ordinary people stealing their thunder, becoming commentators via social media in this internet age. Now, to their credit, they get to be the official journalist couple who retell the official history. And they have the official history in their corner. After all, Richard Allen has been convicted and sentenced to 130 years in the Delphi double homicide. I want to reiterate that my commentary here and elsewhere regarding the Delphi case is speculation and conjecture. I'm not an expert on this case. In fact, I'm very late to the party on this one, unfortunately. Most of the work's already been done. Most of the trails have already been blazed by others. I have seen information that causes me to doubt the official story. And this goes for the previous 3 episodes. My disclaimer is that we're engaging in speculation and allegation, at least on my end. Another thing, I'm not here to kiss Richard Allen's ass. I have no connection to him or his family or anybody in Delphi for that matter. If he's truly guilty, then so be it. I told everyone previously that I'm old school, I'm an extremist of sorts, according to my critics, and I do believe in being tough on criminals. Mercy to the guilty is cruelty to the innocent, as Adam Smith said. You can put an exclamation mark on that sentiment when sex crimes and children are involved. So, I want it to be known that, upon further review of information, if I come across information that I have somehow overlooked or missed that indicates Allen alone is the guilty party, then I will not hesitate to make that my position. The ugly truth is that he did himself in by talking to police instead of lawyering up. And I have to wonder, and I may have expressed this previously, I have to wonder if Kathy Allen ever regrets pushing him to help the police in their investigation. In fact, I hope I am mistaken with all this information so far. I hope that I can find something to convince me that the authorities have the right guy and that this monster will never have another opportunity to victimize another soul. I would love if someone produced some smoking gun evidence showing that Allen alone committed this crime. And even if it somehow came to be that Richard Allen could be proven to be 100% responsible for this crime, there are still about 17 other individuals that I saw named in defense team depositions to be persons of interest or suspects at one point in the investigation. They include the following: monsters like Daniel Nations that threaten hikers and trail walkers with hatchets or axes; 6 sadistic fucks like James Bryan Shadwell that chain little girls up in basements as sex slaves, sporting tattoos of children crying bloody tears; people like Thomas Bruce, who went to a religious supply store to rape and murder shoppers with children present; or how about Paul Etter, a man that abused and kidnapped and raped a woman who was broken down with a flat tire near his home. These are just a few that come to mind. There's plenty more. And they're not the third-party suspects that the defense has mentioned at length. How could it be that the search for a killer in small-town rural Indiana would uncover so many potential perverts and criminals? We have a serious problem in small-town America. Now, okay, I said a lot there. Feel free to comment on anything, or we can go in another direction. That is the end of my opening monologue here for episode 4.
Well, you just smothered the icing on the cake with everything that you just said. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. As far as the murder sheet goes, the murder sheet, in my opinion, was a educated source of information when they first came on the Delphi scene. They were new. They were kind of to be honest, they were a breath of fresh air. And then suddenly all of that changed. They were very even keeled on their coverage. And then all of a sudden it seemed as though they had came in contact with somebody who was willing to leak information from the state. And as long as they were willing to push that narrative, they were going to continue to get information. And from there, I had to stop listening to them a long time ago, because again, I agree with you when you say, if Rick Allen is guilty of this crime, so be it. I'm with you on that 100%. And I think the majority of the people who are have the consensus that Rick Allen is innocent agree with that. And the problem with that is that we've watched for years the deception that the state has implicated in this case, that you can pick so many holes in it without even having access to full discovery or full exhibits. I mean, okay, let's set aside the fact that the crime scene photos are sealed. Okay, take those exhibits that were presented at trial, set them aside, they're sealed. The rest of the exhibits are redacted beyond belief, never have been released. Somebody's playing hide the ball. Somebody's on the left hand, not talking to the right hand. And again, from February 13th of 2017, the transparency in this case has literally been suffocated with smoke and mirrors. That's a problem. And after all, you just listed a handful of suspects, third-party suspects in this case, that ultimately never made the list going into the motion of limine of who could be discussed at trial. Chadwell, Daniel Nations, none of them were on that list. Those that were on the list, when you look at their connections, their statements, they have more of a nexus than Rick Allen. And it took me about a year after Rick Allen was found guilty, because I was very, when I went into covering this case, I was very adamant. We're not gonna shit talk the family. We're not gonna come down and lower the boom on Kelsey. She was a child. I'm going to take this on face value and do the research. And it was about 6 to 8 months in that I started to realize I can't ride that pony anymore. I can't defend this family anymore, because there are so many unanswered, open-ended questions. And I feel stupid defending them. And when I first started, I had all of these people coming on my channel, like, well, this happened, and the family knew this, the family was doing that. Now, and I can honestly say that I did my due diligence. I really, truly did. I didn't, no one wants to point the finger at the family of a child victim and blame them. And I'm honestly saddened to say that I do believe that the family knows exactly what happened to Libby. And the position that they're in now is one of nothing we say or do can bring her back, but we have another child to protect, and that is Derrick. That's my conclusion after all of this. And I super freaking commend you for, we've spent how many hours? We've spent a lot of hours together discussing this case. And in between our discussions, you have taken it upon yourself to go out and obtain information. I guess from my point of view, I would call it the opposition. A podcast like The Murder Sheet, I would consider the opposition, because we are in complete disagreement about this case, Richard Allen. The fact that the defense team is being held to a higher standard than the state, when we know for a fact the state was going above and beyond, leaking information, not just the state, but also a clerk in Judge Gall's office was leaking information. So, no one's going to gain anything from this tit for tat. But the defense can't be held to a higher standard. And the Murder Sheet, I feel, put their, well, how can I explain it? Like, as a YouTube creator, or AKA, I consider this a podcast, I have the ability to do a lot of research work on numerous cases. I could go live every single night covering a different case, and try, of course I want my channel to grow. But at the same time, I'm not a person that is, I have to know literally moment by moment, minute by minute, point by point, the case that I'm discussing. And for me, it takes me a long time to get to the point like I can do now. I can tell you GPS timestamps. I can tell you when the phone was unplugged. I can tell you where the girls were at this time. I can tell you how many steps in between approaching the Monon High Bridge at the north end to the 207 photo to the 213 video, how many steps were taken afterwards. I can go on and on and on and on and on. But it took me a long time to digest that. And if I didn't care about the work that I do, I could have grazed over this case and grazed over 100 others that, yeah, would have probably grown my channel. Um, that's not why I started this. And in the past 6 years, I have invested in four that I can say I truly have focused on so intently that I can, without needing to type out a summary, I can hit record and give you the point by point summary verbally without having to read from a document. And that's how I work. I guess I feel like I'm invested. And with this case, that's where I'm at. And when I look at all of the people involved in this case, I can't, I wish this community wasn't so divided. I wish that there were people who have valuable information. I wish we all could work together for the benefit of, I do believe that Rick Allen is innocent. And it took me a while to get there, but I can confidently say I believe that. When 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I wasn't, I was still on the fence. And for whatever weight it's worth, I'm saying that I now believe that Rick Allen is 100% innocent. Even with that being said, my priority is wanting to find out what happened to Abby and Libby. To me, they come first. Proving what happened to them is going to free Rick Allen. And at the end of the day, all three of them deserve justice. And it's sickening to me that anybody in this country, I'm a part of a lot of social media groups who discuss the case, and the excuses and the arguments that are raised in regards to Rick Allen and well, he said he was there, and whatever the case may be. I don't give a shit what Rick Allen said in his interrogation video. Because that interrogation video to me is an innocent man trying to be cooperative, but then becomes apparently clear that, okay, you're trying to railroad me and I'm going to put my foot down. Many words were put in his mouth. But after that, the way his case was handled, the way he was shipped off, hidden from the public under a fictitious name, shipped off to Westville, put in solitary confinement in a maximum security prison without even having an attorney present at his safekeeping hearing. If you as an American think that's okay, that makes me sick. Because first and foremost, everybody in this country deserves a fair trial. They deserve a defense. Innocent until proven guilty. That is the threshold. And in Delphi, Indiana, and Carroll County, that was not the threshold. Go ahead, Ted.
I agree. If he's so guilty and they have all this overwhelming evidence, why in the world would you play so fast and loose and reckless and violate his rights, knowing that there's a very good chance it could get overturned and you're going to be to blame for it? If someone's truly guilty and you have them dead to rights and have all this evidence against them, you want to treat them very well. You want to make sure they make it to trial so that the state can present its case. And just like you mentioned, too many examples of his rights being violated and from what I understand, outright being tortured in prison. This is shocking stuff. I never would have guessed that something like this could happen in America, or even small town, rural flyover country, conservative, quote unquote, red state America. That is, I never would have guessed. And, I caught something today. We can talk about this next. You had an episode with Chris Todd. Now I think he unequivocally said, he mentioned at one point, this case is like the biggest, what did he call it? The biggest child murder case in the country, in history, something like that.
Yeah, it truly is. I would put this right up there. I would put the Delphi case. So I never thought that I would come across a case with more corruption than the Stephen Avery case. And the Stephen Avery case, it's a little older of a case, but I think first and foremost, the most convincing realm of corruption is the Karen Reed case. That case is putting on display the absolute derogatory corruption of law enforcement that, it's what nightmares are made of. And that's why the case, it's like all eyes on me. People can't get enough of that case. It's so shocking how, Proctor and, the way the case was handled, and the busted taillight and the reversed inside, the evidence garage where they flipped the camera, and, that's just the brink of the iceberg. And of course, there are cases like the Karen Reed case that, for whatever reason, all the light shines on it, and it's being all exposed. And people still to this day are convinced that, oh my God, this is a 1 in a million. What they fail to realize is that it's not. The Delphi case, what transpired in 2017 with this case, I believe law enforcement, and in 2018, 2019, with the removal of Robert Ives, the original prosecutor, in comes swooping in without an election, Nick McClellan. I believe that they thought that they were doing just enough to distract. They were doing just enough to allow the public to pursue different endeavors. And, the arrest of Ron Logan was a pacification of what we arrested him. We know he's a suspect, but we're gonna nail him on all these other charges. And, you should be happy about that. I think that they have been served up a dose of, you got us all fucked up, because the public is not willing to let it go. The lack of transparency, the lies, the change of direction in 2019 put a big fat dunce hat on law enforcement, going, what are you talking about? We just went from a 40 to 50-year-old sketch to a younger 20-year-old man with brown poofy hair, good looking, young bridge guy sketch. And you're telling us the first sketch is now secondary, and you're not giving us any real explanation as to why. I guess they thought that they could sell us a stale bale of goods and we would buy it. So everything that they're getting in Carroll County right now from the public, the fight that they're having to maintain the brick wall, they're having to continue to slap mortar on and place another brick of shielding themselves, they brought on themselves. And if they've truly, the crime con, investigators of the freaking year, if they truly believed the case that they presented to the public and the case they presented at trial, the case that they worked on for years to get to the point to make the arrest of Rick Allen, they truly believed in the work that they did, they wouldn't have to do any of the bullshit that they did. The hiding of interviews, the lying, I'm here to tell you right now, the fact that they claim that 70 days of investigative interviews were lost, I have proof now. That's a fucking lie. That is not true. They know it. Their investigators know it, and they've kept quiet. And when someone asks me, well, my God, do you know how many people it would take to keep a conspiracy like this under wraps and lie? Yeah, I do. If you're on the fringe, you are being fed a story and you're being given instructions to go do your job, and they're telling you what the job is. And those who are not close knitted to what's going on behind the scenes, they have no choice. They have no reason to question their superiors. But those at the core of the honeycomb, like a Nick McClellan, a Steve Mullins, a Shane Evans, Tony Liggett, Tobe Lesenby, Jerry Holman, they have every reason to cover up and lie. And it's called self-preservation. You don't get to be accepting money and being paid off to allow all the legal activities that are taking place in Carroll County while you look the other way and then turn around and arrest those who are padding your pockets. That's my personal opinion. That's where my research has led me. And that's where I look at Derrick German and I say, your silence is your guilt. You've never came out and spoken on behalf of your daughter. You've never demanded answers. You've never questioned the investigation. We've never seen your face. And your daughter was brutally murdered. And you were on an FBI list as a snitch and was being prepared to testify against who? I don't know. But there is documentation that Derrick German was absolutely going to be put on a stand on behalf of the FBI and snitch. Not to mention, this entire time, after being busted numerous times for the stealing of the fertilization that they were stealing from the entities where they were I can't think of the name of the material, amahoxidized or whatever it's called, that the stuff they needed to actually cook meth. He was arrested multiple times with that. He snitched on Christy Martin, who was transporting methamphetamines over Ohio county lines. He snitched. And after snitching and all of these people surrounding him went to prison, he was still on the streets and he was still allowed to do his drug dealings. His family knew it. The Patties knew it. And if they knew it, and on the day of February 13th, when Libby was killed, Becky Patty claimed that he lived in their house. Yet when he was interviewed by police on the 14th, he gave the Samuel Milroy Road address, which is a property that the Patties owned. So why are the Patties lying and saying that he lived there? The Patties, Becky was trying to make him out to be the father of the year. Anything Libby wanted, he would do, yada, yada, yada. Yet he doesn't even give the same address. So the Patties knew what Derrick was about. They knew the trouble that he was in. And the whole statement before they went on the Dr. Phil show with Becky Patty saying, they've got our girls. They knew Derrick was being hunted. They knew Derrick had crossed the wrong people.
Let me stop you right here because I meant to bring this up. And since we're here, I was, of course, scouring YouTube, scouring the comment section, and anything that I ran across that I hadn't heard before or that I thought, what the hell is this about? I need to check this story out. I tried to take a screenshot of it, and I happened to stumble across some comment section, and I saw your account making a comment about Derrick German and drugs or money that was taken, never repaid back. And I thought, what the hell is this about? And it immediately clicked to me that this person making this comment clearly knows something that's way over the heads of like everyone else on YouTube or a casual commenter talking about Richard Allen or Ron Logan, something like this. So I sent you an email and said, you got to tell me exactly what you meant by this. What the hell is this? And
that's how you and I connected, to be honest.
Right. Well, yeah, and it just turned out fortuitous that you had done so much background work. I guess it's not a surprise to me now, seeing all the work that you've done, of how you came across that information. So I sort of refer to it as the Sons of Anarchy or Breaking Bad scenario. So we've introduced this a little bit, but let's go a little bit further. Were there threats against the Patty family, Derrick German's family? Had they been warned? Had Derrick been warned that, hey, you crossed us and you might be getting away for the meantime, but this ain't over? Anything like that stands out?
I honestly, I don't have any proof that there were any threats. I guess you look at the normal case scenario of when you have somebody like Derrick German who has done nothing but lived for lack of a better term, lived the life of crime. And I feel that I've learned the hard way in this case that when you come across something that is, proof worthy of information, that you better screenshot it, because I had to learn the hard way that, when I've come across things that I read it and I was like, oh, wow, Jesus. And then 2 months later, I'm like, okay, where did I find that? And then you realize that it's been scrubbed from the internet. So anybody doing research in this case needs to know upfront that anything that you come across that you think may be relevant, or even if you think it's random and may not be relevant, screenshot it anyway, because you don't know where it's going to lead. But Derrick German, in my opinion, was somebody who, grew up in Delphi amongst many other criminals, including Nick McClelland. It's funny that people, think Nick McClelland is this, all righteous, be out prosecutor who worked his way up the chain. That's not really the case. Nick McClelland was a bottom feeder. He was a defense attorney, public defender, defending and cutting deals for a lot of the scum in the area. And I'm sorry if some people don't believe this synopsis of his character or who he is, but I've been lucky enough to make, I guess, the right connections with people in Delphi, working on other cases, the David Kallenberger case, the Ashley Garth case, and basically exposing myself to the county, going in and, sitting down and having lunch, sitting down and having dinner, going out there year after year, meeting with different people, gaining trust, And my brain is just constantly compiling the information to where for locals there, I feel like the Derrick German scenario, the Becky Patty, the Patty family, it's a norm for them.
It's an open secret. Is that fair to say?
It is. It's a yes. It's an open secret. It's a norm, and they're looking at the Delphi murders as this tragic, and it is tragic. There's no doubt about that it's tragic. Um, but a lot of the locals, knowing this about the family, also a lot of them are cordial and friends with the family. And, they sit and they watch Becky Patty, uh, bare her soul in front of the camera. And to this day, I'll be honest, to this day, a lot of the people that I have communicated with that are close to Becky Patty will tell you Becky Patty just cannot bring herself to admit the truth. She knows the truth deep down, and that is why she's constantly on the defense, defending her family, and nothing's going to bring Libby back. Therefore, she's going to go on the defense because she doesn't want to lose her son. Under normal circumstances, I guess you could say that's a rational behavior, but at the same time, they're condoning all of this. And at the top of the pyramid is the fact that they're willing to sacrifice an innocent man's life to keep an individual that is blood close. And that to me is unforgivable. That to me is something where I'm just I'm a different breed. I'm a different kind of person. I'm a different kind of mother. And I was the mother that when the principal called from school and one of my kids were in school acting out, or my child came home from school complaining about a teacher or complaining about the trouble they got in, my parenting skills required me to ask, well, what exactly did you do to cause this? I wanted to get that out of the way because I wanted to be true in my defense as a parent. And I believe that Becky Patty is not built that way. And she's not the only mother who's not built that way. There's a lot of parents out there that no matter what their child does, they will pick up the shield and the sword and go to battle. And that's the kind of parent that I see Becky Patty being, that no matter what, and the biggest question is let's pretend that this crime was attempted, and let's pretend that Libby survived, or both girls survived, and they were able to come home and give a rendition of what had transpired. And it pointed to Derrick. Where do you think that Becky Patty would have fallen in that scenario? That's another major question. And I know that also when the Dr. Phil episode was getting ready to air and the trailer aired where Becky Patty is saying immediately after the girls were recognized to be missing, she said, "Oh, they've got our girls." And, people made a big deal about that. And it was such a big deal that it ended up being squashed and removed from the trailer on the Dr. Phil show. And it was removed from the internet entirely. And a lot of people have made excuses that, oh, well, that was about the Wolf Pack, the motorcycle club that Becky Patty was renting a house to, and she evicted them and pissed them off. Well, Quester did some research, and we now have the actual eviction notice. And it was the same house that Derrick claimed that he lived in on Samuel Milroy Road, that the motorcycle gang / Wolf Pack was renting, but they weren't evicted until October. We have the eviction notice. So it wasn't until months after the murder. So we can't pretend that, there was this revenge motorcycle gang out to get revenge on Derrick. And in fact, we have no evidence that Derrick was actually involved with any kind of a motorcycle gang whatsoever. Derrick was involved in the drug trade, and he was pretty good and pretty big at it. And I think that once he burnt all of his bridges in Kokomo, Gabe Ellis, Tyler Joe French, all of them, Christy Martin, he sold them upstate, up the river. They all went to prison. And he never got in trouble. I think the next group felt that he was the golden child. If he was dealing and purchasing and trafficking drugs for the Paladinos are not stupid. The Paladinos were trafficking in large amounts of meth, large amounts of cartel drugs from Arizona and California. And I believe that they brought Derrick German into the fold because they felt he was untouchable. After everything that Derrick had been through, law enforcement was on his side. Law enforcement was going to watch out for him. And I believe they were. They were all on the take until Derrick made a bad deal that he didn't pay for. And therefore, it's not up to the Paladinos. It's up to who the Paladinos owed money to that wasn't paid. So that's my opinion. And I will keep that opinion until somebody proves me absolutely wrong. But I look at Derrick German, and he's a guilty man because his daughter was murdered for the decisions and the mistakes that he made.
Now, it's funny, I mentioned the murder sheet in my opening statement here. In there, I'm almost positive, and I have a screenshot of it somewhere in my folder, but they deny that Derrick German snitched on anyone. Now, a couple months ago when I tried to look it up, it did appear to me that according to case records and all that sort of stuff that you can look up on the internet, it did appear to me that for the charges that were brought, to have no sentencing, no jail time, that's a big red flag. And that's the impression that I came away with. Now, that was a cursory search. It's possible that I was looking at the wrong thing or didn't look in the right place. But for someone to get caught with all these drugs and not do any time, that's a big red flag. And I know that from other cases, other street gangs, drugs. I think everyone knows that. And the problem with the police is that they're kind of like Keystone Cops. They can't do their jobs effectively unless they have some inside informant who's feeding them information and helping their investigation. And the flip side of that is that once you get that status with the authorities, you basically have a license to kill and commit mayhem, and you're almost untouchable. And so it's a toxic brew that usually comes out of these situations. Now, with Derrick German, isn't there a tie-in with Michael Thomas as well? Isn't he the arresting officer involved in this? Or was it 2014, 2015 when this happens? When German gets arrested?
I'm not sure. There were multiple arrests. And that's, going back to things being squashed from the internet. Derrick German's police record has been absolutely whitewashed from the My Case system.
The Westville Correctional Facility is a maximum security prison generally reserved for convicted criminals, not people like Richard Allen who are awaiting trial. But his attorneys say Allen is being treated as if he's already been found guilty. In their motion, they say Allen is being held alone in a cell no bigger than a dog kennel, forced to wear soiled and tattered clothes, showering only once or twice a week, and not allowed to see his family.
You literally could not trust any verdict that came out of a trial if this continues to be the situation.
Allen was moved to Westville out of concerns for his safety, but defense attorney John Tompkins, who is not connected to this case, said the facility isn't suitable for someone trying to prepare a defense.
DOC simply does not have to perform that function, so they are not built to perform that function.
Allen's attorneys argue the facility has made it impossible for them to easily confer with their client. They also say it's severely affecting his mental health. They write that when they visited him on Monday, he was delusional and showing symptoms of schizophrenia.
His current conditions of incarceration may render him incompetent to stand trial.
They also released this picture showing what they call his deterioration during his 5 months in lockup. Allen's attorneys are asking the judge to move him to a county jail closer to Delphi and closer to them and his family.
The facts really demand that a better solution be found for keeping him, for having him get access to his attorneys.
Tompkins said he expects the judge will act quickly.
Everybody is presumed innocent. Everyone is given a chance and a fair opportunity to defend themselves. And this motion is all about that.